help me welcome Hannah Ibanez.
So I'm Hannah. I'm a social justice podcaster, and I'm a public defender, and I have subsequently seen some shit. If you're even a little bit aware of the news, oh, that's me, you know that we are going through some pretty big issues in our country right now surrounding social division, misinformation, and injustice. So injustice and the idea of justice is something that we all have a grasp on, and I feel like we all sort of get. But it's one of those things that seems like it's somebody else's job, right? It's like, oh, this thing's pretty horrible. I really hope the people in charge do something about it. I'm just gonna leave it here and hope that it goes away. But it doesn't, and it gets worse. So painfully and slowly, I've realized that my individual actions as a public defender don't actually do much big picture. Yes, I help my individual clients on a case-by-case basis, but when one person leaves the system, there's a pile of new files waiting for me to fill those spots. It can be really overwhelming every day seeing all these horrible things. I would come home and talk to my friends and family, and they would sort of validate me in their reactions when they would be like, "You saw what? You know, what happened? Is that legal?" And so I realized that really the only contribution I could make as a public defender, and probably as a human at this point, is to spread awareness, is to spread information about what I have the privilege to experience and know, and to keep those conversations going. Because I really do think that awareness of injustice is the first step towards eliminating it. I want to be really clear that I'm not here to judge anybody. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. Yeah. I'm not here to judge anybody. I'm not here to tell you what to think or how to think. I'm asking you to think critically about what I'm going to be telling you. I'm asking you to challenge maybe the systems and practices that are in place right now and question who they're really benefiting. Ask yourselves if they benefit us. I'm here to tell you that it is patriotic to question authority. That's kind of the fabric of America, right? It was a group of people that were like, this government kind of sucks, screw that. Let's go make one for the people. So we should definitely keep that same energy going. Martin Luther King Jr., one of my absolute heroes, he did so much for the civil rights movement. A lot I didn't even realize. I learned so much more, weirdly enough, in law school about this movement than in any other part of my life, how thorough it was, how many different areas of the country that he touched and our society. And I really like Martin Luther King Jr.'s vibe about justice because his position was that everything affects everybody. A threat to justice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And I truly believe that. So I just want to remind everybody just to take intermittent sips of tea when you need it. There will be kittens at 11:30. Strap in. We're going to get right into the thick of it with some of that shit that I've seen. ICE, the Immigration Customs Enforcement. Locally, the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office houses ICE detainees at no cost to the federal government, who should actually be footing the bill because it's a federal issue. Instead, they're charging you guys, the taxpayer, for the cost of detaining ICE deportees. In Florida, it is perfectly legal to fire somebody for being gay, for being trans, for being queer. Sexual orientation is not a federally protected class, and although 21 states have enacted legislation to protect their LGBTQIA folk, Florida's not one of them. The criminalization of homelessness. This one's a huge issue. I'm gonna need a sip of water before this. Okay. I'm shaking violently. So we spend millions of dollars each year to cycle homeless people through the criminal justice system, with the taxpayer, again, footing the bill for the costs of policing, incarceration, and adjudication. Policing refers to the costs of increased police presence. You see those golf carts over by Williams Park at dawn and dusk, clearing out homeless individuals. Adjudication, which is the cost for me, the attorney, for the prosecutor, for the judge, for the legal proceedings and all the litigation that's involved with each and every single criminal case. And incarceration, of course, speaks to the costs of housing somebody in the jail. Now, We specifically target homeless individuals with laws such as prohibitions against sleeping in parks, the criminalization of panhandling, and we even arrest them for open containers, which seems to be a non-issue the first Friday of every month and during our markets in the exact same locations, but I digress. And obviously, this just makes a bad problem worse because these people go through the system and then they come out, and guess what they still don't have? A place to live. It would cost the government $10,000 per person to provide housing for 1 year. Contrast that with the $30,000 that we spend per case to handle it through the criminal justice system, keeping in mind that a single person can have several cases in 1 year. I had a client who came through the system 17 times in 1 year for crimes related to his homelessness. So you do that math. Let's talk about the cash bail system. Every day, millions of legally innocent people sit behind bars because they can't afford bail. When I say legally innocent, I mean these are people who are presumed innocent. They haven't been sentenced, they haven't had their trial yet, they're awaiting their court dates. Bail refers to the amount of money that a judge sets that a person has to pay in order to get out of jail and handle their court case from the outside. If you're wealthy, you can afford the entire amount, and then you get the entire amount back when your case is over. It's something that they use to ensure that you show up to court. If you can't afford your entire bail amount, but you can only afford a little, you would go through a bail bondsman. A bail bondsman is a company that will post the bail for you, but they will charge you a non-refundable 10% fee of your bond amount. So if your bond is $10,000, you will pay them $1,000 that you'll never get back in order to get out. If you don't have any money, you will stay in jail until your case ends. I had a client one time on a second-degree misdemeanor, which the max that you can serve on a second-degree misdemeanor is 60 days, stay in jail for 58 days before the prosecutor dropped the case. He's actually kind of a rarity. Most of the time, people take a plea, whether or not they're guilty, in order to get out of jail. They have jobs to get back to. They have apartments that they can't get evicted from. They have children to pick up from school. So they end up racking up a criminal history that's not representative of who they actually are. Okay, here we go. Speaking of bail bondsmen, I'm going to talk about this little byproduct of the privatization of the criminal justice system. This is actually a picture from a bail bondsman in Florida, their website, just to kind of give you a vibe. So in 2018, last year, the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office came up with this actually really dope program called APAD, the Adult Pre-Arrest Diversion Program. And it allowed people with certain limited qualifying nonviolent misdemeanors to avoid ever being prosecuted or going to jail by participating in this contract through the Sheriff's Office where they would do community service, pay a fine, maybe do some classes, and then they never got prosecuted and they didn't enter the state criminal system. Everyone was really excited about this. This seemed like a good idea. These guys were not excited. They opposed it tooth and nail on the grounds that it was going to hurt business. And they probably were wearing those outfits too. They are really, really powerful political lobbyists. Bail bondsmen have a lot of money in our state government to try to keep decriminalization efforts at a minimum. Obviously, this makes things really sketchy for the criminal justice system because the criminal justice system should seek to eliminate itself, right? Not create and sustain a booming private industry, nor should it do more harm than good, or be more dangerous than the crime it polices. So let's talk about some of the dangers with policing. A study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences earlier this month listed police violence as a leading cause of death for black men in America. The study indicated that black men are 2.5 times more likely than white men to die during an encounter with law enforcement, and that 1 in every 1,000 black boys or men will die during an encounter with the police. So what do we do about this? One of the main ways to combat this issue specifically is with body cams. It's a system that we can put in place that helps keep everybody in the system accountable. And if somebody doesn't do their job right or does it incorrectly, we can hold that person accountable. The same thing that would happen to me or you if we did something wrong at our jobs. The only reason that we're aware of a lot of these issues of policing right now, and the only reason it's a national conversation, is because we have video footage that's showing us what's going on. And most of that video footage is coming from body cams. It's also coming from in-car cruiser cameras. Locally, the Pinellas State Attorney, Bernie McCabe, 20 years and counting, has publicly stated his intent to continue to keep body cams out of your Pinellas County criminal justice system. He's been quoted by several different news outlets saying, "I've never seen them make a difference. Oh, Bernie, we'll get back to you." Earlier this year in 2018, March of 2018, the St. Pete Police Department unveiled a new $78.5 million new headquarters. It's state of the art. This one is hurricane proof, unlike the one that is still standing from the 70s across the street. And another $6 million for an indoor shooting range. None of that money was spent on mental health resources. In fact, there's one psychologist available for the over 1,000 employees at St. Pete Police. None of it was spent on cultural or sensitivity training, and most importantly, none of it was spent on body cams, in my opinion. So I want to get back to, well, this guy. So Bernie McCabe has indicated that he's never seen them make a difference. Well, in my first year of practice, I had a client. She was a black mother. She was arrested for trespassing and resisting an officer without violence. She was at her son's high school football game when it started to rain. She took the child's grandmother, her mom, child's grandma, to the car to avoid the crowds and the rain, and then ran back into the game to catch the last 15 minutes and take her child home. As she approached the gate to re-enter, a police officer stopped her and said, "You can't come in." She said, "Sir, I just spoke to somebody. She said it was fine if I could just drop my mom off and come back in. I'm a team mom. I have a child playing on the field who I'm taking home. I have a ticket. Here's my ticket stub. Didn't say no re-entry." Eventually, I can't speak for him. The officer got frustrated, embarrassed, whatever it was. He grabs her by the wrists, twists her arms behind her back, slams her against a chain link fence, arrests her, destroys her phone in the process, and she spends the night in jail. Her child is sitting on the field in the rain, waiting for his mom to come and get him, had to eventually be taken home by a coach. And this case went on for over a year. During that year, she couldn't return to her child's school because of a no return order connected to the criminal case. She couldn't pick up her son and drop him off. She couldn't go to any of his games. She missed the rest of his season, and she missed his college football signing day. All this for Bernie McCabe's office to drop this case the morning of trial. The reason that this case was dropped the morning of trial was the same reason why I set it for speedy trial. Very, very, very late in the case, I discovered that there was body cam footage, and this surprised me because my impression of Pinellas County was that the several dozen police departments don't have body cams because of Bernie's stance, except for one, this one. I found that body cam footage, and it showed exactly what I just told you, which is exactly what my client told me throughout that entire year. And it was exactly contradictory to what the officer had alleged. So, yeah, Bernie, they make a difference. And you should know that. Now, because of Bernie McCabe's strong stance against body cams, again, only one department out of several dozen has them. His influence is also a big reason why none of that $78.5 million plus 6 was spent obtaining them. But if I'm being honest with you, we're kind of also part of the reason. This budget was approved to the city of St. Pete. They hold public meetings. They are recorded and published afterwards. If we have time for things like this, we have time to pop in on our public servants to make sure they're spending our money the way we want them to. And speaking of spending our money, we can hold ourselves accountable for how we spend our money. That's cute. Okay. So how we spend our money can have a huge impact on society, right? Because not everybody works in a job that has like super obvious direct connections with creating justice, but everybody spends money. So I want to talk to you about my arch nemesis, Walmart. Did you know that in the state of Florida, if you pick up 3 petty theft charges, petty theft charge is the crime of stealing an item worth $500 or less, they can go from being misdemeanors to felonies. Once they go to felonies, that exposes you to prison. Walmart is the largest prosecuting body of petty thefts in the state of Florida, by far. They have an entire in-house law enforcement team. They have the state-of-the-art surveillance. They can see what you're texting on your phone. They have a team of security guards posing as undercover decoy shoppers, just hunting for people stealing food. They prosecute each and every case to the fullest extent of the law. They work closely with law enforcement. They show up to depositions. They investigate with the prosecuting office. They provide that pristine video surveillance. And they even hold individuals in their in-house holding cells for police awaiting their arrival. Now, you have to wonder, if Walmart is willing to spend all this money, right, all these resources on this in-house team to combat stealing, why wouldn't they just do what Publix does? Why wouldn't they just put an officer in plain clothes, walk around the store? That way people can see that they're being watched, and that would curb people from stealing. And given that they can see everything happening as it's happening, they could also just be like, hey, aisle 7, take that, steak out of your pants, or whatever. Wouldn't that be way more cost effective? Wouldn't that negate the necessity to involve the police and have employees losing time to go and work through the criminal justice system and show up for depots and answer to subpoenas? And wouldn't it be more effective, cheaper? It would. But here is the kicker. Walmart has a different investment in mind. Because you see, if you go to prison for, let's say, petty thefts, that you've racked up stealing diapers, water, food, clothes, you will work as a prison laborer for 74 cents a day. For who, you ask? Walmart. Walmart is one of the many corporations who depends on prison labor for cost efficiency. We can stop supporting corporations that have catastrophic implications on our society. Walmart affects not only our criminal justice system, but our elections at the local, state, and national level. Here's a list of some corporations that you can just take a closer look at. I would encourage you to check out the places that your money goes to every month, your banks, your insurance companies, your coffee shops, and think about maybe replacing them with either more ethical or more local brands. Or if you're not in a position to adjust your spending situation, just know that, keep it in your mind. Maybe eventually one day that can have an effect on your behavior, but it's good to know it. It's easy to feel like we can't do anything, but the yield to public pressure, is real. The yields to the public dollar is real. Like the Marquise McLaughlin case. Last year, Florida came under scrutiny again for our stand your ground gun laws when Marquise McLaughlin was murdered over a parking spot at a local convenience store. Marquise McLaughlin was inside the convenience store with his son when somebody ran in and said to him, hey, somebody's outside yelling at your wife. So he runs out. His wife is pregnant and sitting in the driver's seat of the car with 2 other children in the back. They now have 4 children, 3 at the time she was pregnant with the 4th. He runs up and he pushes the man who is at the window of his wife's car, kind of making aggressive movements. Is that me? No? Okay, cool. Thank you. So he runs up to him, he pushes him. He doesn't continue hitting him, he doesn't go after him, he pushes him away from his partner. Michael Dracus sits up, pulls a gun out from his pocket, and and shoots Marquise McLaughlin as he's retreating. This entire incident was captured on video, and I encourage you to go and watch it if that's something that you can do without feeling super triggered. Sheriff Bob Gualtieri arrived on the scene and cleared it of any wrongdoing. Didn't make any arrests and told Michael Draca was free to go. He cited Florida's Stand Your Ground gun law, which is a law that was introduced. I also encourage you to check out the origins of that. Hint, it has to do with Walmart. It allows a person to use force, even deadly force, if they feel threatened. Now, what this law did was it changed self-defense. Self-defense used to be, if you want to use violence, it has to be a last resort. If you can retreat safely, you have to retreat safely. That was a legal requirement that a person had to reach before they were able to use self-defense. Instead, the Stand Your Ground law eliminated that requirement and allows a person to react even if they just feel threatened subjectively. So when the video spread and the news of the non-arrest spread, the public pressure started to build. A movement ensued, and the slogan for the movement was "Pressure busts pipes." People were protesting, they were marching, they were tweeting, they were talking, they were podcasting, and eventually, the decision to arrest Michael Draca was made. That was a consequence of public pressure. I have no doubt that this case would have been open and shut and gone nowhere. No one would have heard about it, no one would have known about it. They would have sprayed the blood off of the cement floor and continued business as usual if it weren't for that public pressure. And now, I stand before you with Michael Draca currently on trial miles up the road in the second day of the defense case in chief. So yeah, we can make a fucking difference. But you can't do justice all the time. The truth is that even when you're working in the justice system like I am, it's really not all that justice-y. It's really unfair, it's really corrupt, and no one person can fix it. It's really easy to get overwhelmed and just kind of shut down. But there are so many different ways to contribute. Just spreading little-known truths is a form of justice. How many times have you guys read something or learned something or saw something and that kind of opened your mind or changed your position on something? And then that ultimately changed your actions. Imagine if we all did that. My podcast and my social media are my true forms of daily justice. For me, it's important to try to take the information that I witness and experience and share it with a bunch of people who I feel like should know, because that's how I felt when I learned it. Why doesn't everyone know this stuff? We can't do it all, but we can all do a little bit, a lot. I don't want you to feel shame for not being a level 10 activist all the time. It would be shitty of me to expect that anybody compromise personal safety, financial security, or anything like that in the name of justice. But it is not an all or nothing gig. There are teeny tiny things that everyone can do to adjust the culture and create the culture that we all live in. And I think awareness of injustice is the first step. So I will say that I follow a lot of people on social media. I post things all day, every day on my Instagram feed. One of the fastest steps that you could take toward justice right now is following these people. They're also really into it, and they kind of do all the work for you. You can kind of just check in and, see what the updates are. Follow your local law enforcement on socials. Notice what they're posting, how they're saying things. Notice where they show up and where they don't show up. If you're a reader, here are some books that changed my life, and maybe they'll change yours. Oh, and yes, one of these is a Hillary recommendation from her inclusive talk, so Circles. If you are into podcasts, definitely check out mine if you're inclined. Also, here are some other ones that you might enjoy if you're a commuter or you're just somebody who's into listening to podcasts. Use your TV time to watch things like The 13th. That's probably my #1 recommendation today out of everything. And When They See Us, both by Ava DuVernay. If you have children, you can watch things that can create conversations about power and justice, like The Hunger Games. Harry Potter, the Black Panther, Star Wars, one of my personal favorites. We talked about being more intentional about where you spend your money. If you're somebody that likes to donate, here are some organizations that you can check out. And if you are so inclined, maybe throw them $1 or $5. Try to support businesses that align with your beliefs. Participate in local politics. This is a screenshot from an event one of our local coffee owners, Sarah, hosted, where we all just got together and discussed the amendment ballot that was a little bit confusing. And we went through amendment by amendment, and we discussed all the issues, and we explained things away, and I thought it was really informative and really cool. We have elections coming up in 2020, but not just national elections. We have state attorney elections. Bernie McCabe is running for his 5th 4-year term. As of right now, unopposed. We'll see how that plays out. We have public defender elections happening. We also have sheriff elections happening. So keep an eye out for those. Have conversations. Keep tabs on the candidates and inform yourselves. City council elections this year. Primaries on the 27th. Keep it coming. Okay, this one is personal to me, but it's important. Please report for jury duty. I really can't tell you how much more important it is than they make you feel. Please be critical of the police. There are so many things that we can't tell you, we defense attorneys can't tell you by law. We hide the sentences that people receive from you. So yes, maybe this person stole this pack of diapers from Walmart, but is that where we want to spend our judicial economy to send that person to prison? Is that how we want to spend our tax money? Does that make sense? Maybe not. Finally, look critically at the decisions that you're making in your line of work. Like if you're in advertising, you're making decisions about representation, word choice, tone, what you're putting into the culture and the culture you're creating. This is a great example of what not to do. I think of those like, man up billboards over 275. Have you guys seen those? It's like horrifying. It's like somebody pinching their body and they're being like, get liposuction, man up. It's like, oh my God, it's 7, why? You know, let's talk to somebody about that. If you're in journalism, you're making decisions about representation, word choice. This is actually a client of mine. She is trans. Throughout this entire article, she was referred to as a man dressed up as a woman. Throughout the entire discovery process, the police referred to her as a man dressed up as a woman. In her housing, in Pinellas County Sheriff custody at the jail, she was referred to as a man placed with older men in her holding cells and subjected to very specific violence. Pinellas County Sheriff's Office was one of the first 5 floats in Pride. What does tough on crime really mean? What are we saying when we say convict, felon, criminal, instead of, I don't know, just their name? These are the respective photographs that were used for these stories when they broke. This is a teenage shooting victim at the hands of a grown man, and the other is a convicted rapist. These were the headlines that were used. 3-time Stanford swimmer, all-American swimmer. What is that? We can do better. If you're in education, you are an angel and I love you and thank you. You have golden opportunities to teach critical thinking skills, correct misinformation, challenge stereotypes, distinguish between opinion and fact. And I encourage you to open your students up to respectfully challenge authority, even yours. We all have the opportunity to address this in our family circles and our friend circles, and oftentimes this can be the most difficult. Sometimes you're just like, oh, that's just my dad, man. I don't want to deal with it. But you should challenge that circle. You should hold the people that you love accountable if they're spreading misinformation or perpetuating injustice. Make Thanksgiving dinner a little bit uncomfortable. Smooth it out by dessert. Keep the conversation going. You don't have to change people's minds overnight. But you do need to start wedging space to create room for that conversation. Because change happens over time. It's not, this is where you're at, this is where I'm at, that's the end of it. We're humans, man. We have so many critical thinking skills. It doesn't have to be that black and white, because it's not. And please remember that everything is everything. We live in an intersectional society. Discrimination against one social group ultimately overlaps with discrimination against another social group. Be allies to one another. Do your work as allies to one another. Not everyone, I'm flossing. Not everyone can do everything all the time. But if we all take a little piece of what's important to us and stick to it and stay consistent with it, we will be so far ahead of where we are right now. Just like we are so far ahead of where we were an hour ago. Thank you.
What is one thing, just one, that you wish everyone would do differently? And if you need a little pick-me-up, they said, by the way, badass, you crushed it today.
Thank you. That's really sweet. One thing I think I wish everyone would do differently. This is gonna sound probably a little cringy for some of you guys, but I mean it. I wish people were more like loving towards one another, more compassionate, and saw themselves more in one another. I feel like people see things happening and they're very, like, a lot of times we have an immediate reaction to be like, ugh, that. Or like separate that from us or remove that from our society when, you know, you can't. That's part of us, that's who we are. I think that's what I wish everyone would do, is just make a little bit of an adjustment to, instead of react or to shut down, to kind of be like, all right, I don't necessarily love what this person is saying or what they stand for, but let me just sit with this. Let me sit with this discomfort and like try to be a little bit more compassionate, and then, you know, maybe there will be a shift and you guys can, you know, move forward where you may have otherwise never interacted again.
What's your self-care routine? Can you repeat the question?
What's my self-care routine is the question. I like to exercise. I spend a lot of time with my friends. I love music. Music is very therapeutic for me. It's something I listen to hype me up. I almost like obsessively, even the record label aspect of it, I love to know, you know, who's going where and, you know, what's being released and who's, I don't know, pop culture is really calming to me, I think, because it, in a way, is like a thermometer in the country's butt of like what we're thinking and what we're feeling, like what we're consuming, you know? So that really calms me. I really like to consume that. Are there laws prohibiting cop watching, i.e. standing around to watch police activity when shit appears to be going down? I love you. Number one. Number two, yes and no. Yes, in that arguably if you're getting really aggressive with an officer and they are affecting an arrest, you have to understand that they pretty much can do whatever they want in that moment. And your remedy is to be able to fight it after the fact, but in that moment, the decision that they make is going to be upheld by the state attorney's office. So if you are going to be filming the police, I would highly recommend doing so from a safe distance. If something is happening on one side of the street, stay on the other side of the street. You do not want to run into an issue where they're saying you are compromising the scene. So make sure that you're far enough away to see, but don't get too close that you can end up exposing yourself to getting arrested or being in trouble. So just be really careful.
Can you just tell them that we are going to do that?
Can you provide a list of, yes, okay, so a list of all the resources you mentioned, books, social, we're going to do that. That's what she told me to say. As a business owner, how can we give back? How can we help with racism? I don't know what that says. Starter? Maybe
Conversation starter. Maybe.
Conversation starter? Maybe, okay.
How do you start that conversation?
So I think it would, in the workplace.
Probably. Business owner?
Is it maybe? Okay. So I think it would depend what kind of business you're in. If you're like in retail, I would say probably mindful cultural sensitivity training. You know, if you have people manning the store looking for a certain demographic of person, maybe don't do that. If you're an artist, I guess that you can contribute, you could try to find ways to contribute and make the industry a little bit more diverse and a little bit more culturally accessible. A lot of businesses really only exist for the middle class, and there's not a lot of other sects of society that interact with them. So I don't know, it's kind of a hard question to ask because I don't know the business that you're asking about, but if you DM me, I can give you a more specific guideline. But I mean, starting off, just don't be mean or a jerk. What's your top social justice reform idea? You guys. All right. Okay. For me, it's a little bit controversial because it's just not what everybody believes or agrees in, but I think that the privatization of some of our public systems is a problem. I would start with taking private money, me personally, out of the criminal justice system, and I mean no private defense attorneys, no bail bondsmen. Everyone gets an attorney that's appointed to them. Everyone has the same justice afforded to them, regardless of socioeconomic status. You don't sit in jail because you're poor. And the police departments don't just have millions upon millions upon millions of dollars to do kind of whatever they want with. That's probably where I would start. How can I help make a difference with homeless injustice? I would say probably start showing up at your criminal justice complex up in Clearwater. If you see things like what I'm talking about, which you will, if you sit through a first appearances court hearing, which they happen every day, they're for people who were just arrested, you'll see that most of the docket is people who are arrested for being homeless, for trespassing from a homeless shelter, for sleeping outside, for things like that, and start writing your state attorney's office. Start holding Bernie McCabe accountable for what he's doing with your money, just like we did with Marquise McLaughlin and Michael Draka. I think that's probably the best first step that you can take, is watching him, because injustice, or not just him, any injustice, it thrives and happens behind closed doors and in the shadows when no one's watching. When people are watching, justice is maintained. It's not this self-sufficient system. It's corruptible. So if you can keep tabs on what's going on, you're in a better position to combat what's going on. What are you and others alike doing online to reach more people, especially a younger audience? I don't know. I guess I try to provide information that from completely different areas of society and just try to share that and keep those conversations going. I do, however, maintain my Instagram private just because I talk a lot of crap about the police, so I just feel safer. But my podcast is a place that I hope a lot of different demographics and people and classes would reach. But again, it's kind of hard because not everybody is listening. Not everybody necessarily has the ability to listen to a podcast, for example. So I guess I don't really check in to say I'm reaching this certain amount of people. I just do what I can. I do it anyway, regardless of whether or not it's reaching people, and hope that it is. I guess is my answer to that.
Related.
What are some ways that we can get the word out to people about the injustices happening around us? Talk about them. Continue to have those conversations. There are people that you guys know that weren't here today. You can share that information with them. And hopefully it blows their mind and they can share it with somebody else. And again, I really do think the first step towards eliminating injustice is putting everybody on the same page with what's actually happening. So I think keeping the conversation going, not letting it die out and just saying, there's just so much going on. Let's talk about something mindless. Try to maybe spread one piece of justice or one correct and misinformation a day. Start small and see how that feels. Are you reaching out to creative news companies about the awareness of how corrupt advertising is being shown? So when my clients are reported in the media, and they're typically misreported, either by the facts of what happened or what their charge was, I will reach out to those specific news outlets and say, hey, that's bullshit. As a reporter, you should know better. You should do better. Here's the correct information. Please correct it. Outside of that, no. How do you take care of yourself and stay optimistic when the world feels overwhelmingly horrible? Stuff like this gives me spurts of hope that keep me going through what seem like really long stretches of hopelessness. it's kind of the same for my job. You know, day in, day out, it's like, okay, well, there's my heart shattered on the floor again. Guess I'll just go home. But every now and then, justice does happen, and it fills me up and carries me through long stretches of no justice or injustice. And that keeps me going. That fills my hope tank up. And I think as long as you have hope, that's really all you need.